Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're building a deck around Mirrorform from Lorwyn Eclipsed, a 6-mana instant saying each non-land permanent you control becomes a copy of target non-aura permanent. So it's not the easiest card to parse, but incredibly effective once you see it in action. So the goal with Mirrorform is to kind of use it as a finisher. Once we build up a board with a few non-land permanents, we can cast it, hopefully targeting something juicy, some large creature for instance, and then turn all our smaller permanents into that huge creature to hopefully win the game on that very same turn, since we'll also be able to attack with whatever permanents don't have summoning sickness. And Mirrorform pairs incredibly nicely with the various overlords. We've got the blue overlord of the Flood Pits to draw 2 cards and then discard a card. Can even impend it for 1 and double blue, and then it will stay in play as an enchantment, which is also a lot harder for the opponent to remove as opposed to a regular creature. And then the white overlord of the Mistmoors makes a pair of 2/1 flying insect tokens, also increasing our non-land permanent count to set up our Mirrorform in the first place. And then, once we're ready and have enough permanents in play, we can cast Mirrorform targeting one of the overlords, and even if they're still impended, they will turn into their creature variant and be able to attack right away. And if we can make 3 or 4 overlords of the Mistmoors, we can probably attack and be in a winning position afterwards, or just win the game on the spot instead. So that's the main combo that we're working towards. I'm including it in this kind of blue-white control shell for a couple reasons. One, it allows us to play a longer game where we have time to cast a 6-mana card in the first place, since if we're playing it in kind of a ramp deck, we either ramp into it quickly or we get to run over before we ever get a chance to draw it and cast it. So by playing it in a control deck, we have the time to set it up, and it also allows us to only run 2 copies of Mirrorform and only a handful of these overlords, since we have 8 of these big card draw spells between stock up and consult the star charts, so we can assemble all these various combo pieces when the time is right. And in the meantime, we can keep the board clear with our various sweepers, which are pretty well positioned in the current best of 1 meta. There's the Star Cage to exile any creatures and artifacts with mana value 2 or less, and then we also have Day of Judgment to just destroy all creatures. And again, because we're impending the overlords, we're not going to destroy them with our own Day of Judgment, so we can still keep them in play to set up our Mirrorform. And then we have a few other removal spells that also stay in play as an extra permanent to eventually copy with Mirrorform. We've got Seam Rip at 1 mana to exile any non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Then there's Aang's Iceberg, which we can play at instant speed thanks to Flash to exile a non-land permanent. And then we also have the White Aura Sight, which can also exile a non-land permanent and tap for a white mana afterwards, which is still useful for maybe casting another 1-mana card afterwards, like Seam Rip. We also have a few hate cards sprinkled in, especially Authority can be useful against any aggro decks with a lot of haste creatures. The life gain's also handy in a control deck, and having opposing creatures enter tapped also kind of clears a path to set up a deadly Mirrorform, as our opponent's less likely to have a few blockers back. And then Rest in Peace can also get some free wins against the graveyard decks, and is still a cheap permanent that we can keep in play to set up our Mirrorform. Can technically also discard it to the blue overlord if we really don't want it. And then the mana base has 26 lands, since we don't really want to miss any lane drops. Plenty of blue-white dual lands, including some tapped archives to surveil. The Anchorage can also maybe attack and leave a map token behind, which is an extra permanent for Mirrorform. And I'm also playing 2 Fountain Ports, which we can also maybe activate to make a few more tokens, which can then also set up a more powerful Mirrorform afterwards. And then Mistrise Village can also be pretty important against opposing control decks with counter spells to make sure we can cast an uncounterable Mirrorform. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. Our hands will need a few more lanes, but it's functional. The Surveil helps us find lane 3, and then stock up should find a couple more. I'll keep an Anchorage. Our hand is pretty weak to opposing control decks, but our entire deck is going to be pretty soft to hard counters and instant speed removal. So happy to see turn 1 Forest. Pollinator is not a super high priority target for Seam Rip, so I think I'll wait. Even though it does allow them to maybe go Badger Mole into another 2-drop. We can maybe double Seam Rip next turn if that's the case. It's going to be a Leyline Weaver. That one we could exile. So the blue-green Badger Mole deck. Ouroboros, we can also exile at instant speed with Iceberg. And then Quantum Riddler is the other scary card they can have. For now, Seam Rip is not the most mana efficient play, admittedly. The problem is I do not have a Day of Judgment in hand to reset the board if they do tap out for an Ouroboros. So then I could fall behind pretty quickly. So I think for now I'm still gonna Seam Rip. And then maybe next turn I can stock up and still cast a 1 mana Seam Rip. Opponent just using the Riddler to draw. That's fine. And another one. At least those won't stay in play. But now we know that our opponent's got a powerful late game. Day of Judgment is good to have. So I can either stock up or impend the Overlord. Stock up digs a bit deeper. And there's nothing I necessarily wanted to get rid of. Rest in Peace, not completely useless, since it can get rid of a Nature's Rhythm. But I'll take the lands instead. I'll just take Double Verge, I guess. And pass it back. And there's Ouroboros. So this could be a fine turn for Day of Judgment. Yeah, that's okay. And maybe next turn hardcast Overlord. Doesn't line up super well in the face of Quantum Riddler, which can just block it. Opponent's got another Pollinator. And Weaver. And a Mockingbird to copy it. Another Day of Judgment's not bad. Or I can hardcast Overlord and then still maybe Seam Rip if I care for it. Probably want to wait to Day of Judgment until they play at least one Quantum Riddler. Yeah, let's just cast Overlord. Blocks pretty well. Alright, and then the Aura side's not bad either. Do I still need to play the Seam Rip? Opponent's gonna play Quantum Riddler next turn, untap the 2 Weavers. So that would give them access to a bunch more mana. Could slow that down, although the plan is probably to Day of Judgment soon anyways. So maybe I do ditch a Seam Rip and keep the bigger answers. Could end up biting me if I need to get rid of a Badger Mole Cub on the cheap. So maybe I do get rid of like an Iceberg, even though it can be useful against Ouroboros. And then I'll still hang on to the Seam Rip, but it could be useful at dealing with a Cub. Otherwise they can generate a ton of mana. So Riddler draws 2. And there's a Cub. So now Weaver taps for 2 mana. So our opponent still has 8 mana available here. They could technically hardcast a Craterhoof, but I guess they would still untap those Weavers to attack with them as well. So then it would probably be lethal. Nature's Rhythm for 4, getting Ouroboros presumably. Yeah, I wonder if they Rhythm for 2, if they don't have enough mana to get a Craterhoof if it's in their deck. Now I may as well just take 6. Get an extra attack with the Drowner and then Day of Judgment. Found the Mirrorform, that's good. So this turn, just tap out for Day of Judgment, can play Archive. What don't I need? Could be the untapped lands. But I will keep land on top. So we can look into hardcasting Overlord of the Mistmoors, or we can impend a bunch of stuff to set up Mirrorform. at which point we can also target the opponent's Riddler. Alright, so options aplenty. Kinda just like getting rid of the opponent's stuff once again. Aura side Riddler. And then I can impend the blue Overlords and seam rip the Weaver all at once. So I guess I'll start here. Starcage could also be useful. Although next turn I might have the mana for Overlord into Mirrorform, although of course Summoning Sickness will still be a thing. And I'll just get rid of the Starcage. Try to keep the board clear. And now we're starting to add a bunch of permanents to the board for Mirrorform. So yeah, next turn impend plus casts. Looks appealing. And then attacking with a bunch of Overlords will make even more flyers. Rhythm for 4 can get another Ouroboros, that's fine. So I can go Overlord into Mirrorform. Of course, some of the Overlords will still have Summoning Sickness, but I'll still be able to attack with 3 of them, since one will be tapped from the Aura side. But that means our opponent's still forced to chump block with Ouroboros. And then we'll also have plenty of blockers back in case of any potential Craterhoof shenanigans. So we should be pretty safe. Another option was to copy Ouroboros, which also could have been fun. But yeah, that's gonna be good enough. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Got some removal, got some card draw. Can start with a tapped village. And a miner's a good one to exile. Yeah, I'll use a seam rip. Even though Starcage can get rid of it too. So mono black. And a flail as a discard outlet to enable some of their synergies. Okay, can consult if needed, but I would rather kick it. So this is a matchup where Authority of the Consuls would be great, since it would let their creatures enter tapped. So then haste is a lot less effective. Starcage will also get rid of the flail. So that's probably still the play for next turn. Alright, opponent does not even attack. Maybe they were concerned about a removal spell that targets tapped creatures. Since they might have put us on the artifact deck, which plays the Saw Blades. Now second corpses. Gets in for 4. So if I main phase consult with Kicker, I could find another Seam Rip or Authority. So yeah, I think that's worth it. As opposed to trying to keep up appearances. And then should probably play my land first. Found both Seam Rip and Authority. So those are good, although I kind of like the Overlord too to set up Mirrorform. So at that point probably just Seam Rip to get rid of the guaranteed skeleton that's already in play. And then next turn we can impend Overlord, turn after probably attack for the win. And Grim Bobble's fine. I just want to sack it to pick up corpses again, which is very good in a grindier matchup, being able to replay it over and over. But unlike a typical control deck, we've got this combo finish that can just end the game out of nowhere. And by impending the Overlord, we also play around instant speed removal. At least creature removal, since they won't be able to take out Overlord in response. Opponent picks up 1 corpses, both corpses. And we get to impend. So the only thing I'm worried about now is some sort of discard spell for Mirrorform. And even if they take out my insects, we'll be okay. Corpses is back. And a miner will have haste as well. So yeah, authority would have been solid too. But just winning the game sounds appealing. Cast is just because. Finding, I guess, another consult. And then Mirrorform. Target Overlord. And smash. Alright, and that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a slow but functional hand. Day of Judgment as a reset button against kind of a white aggro deck. So they can grab my tap land, which is tapped anyway. And then I'll keep a plains on top. Next turn Authority, Anchorage. And then we should be alive by the time we cast our Day of Judgment. Yeah, this Aura matchup is one of our better ones between Starcage and Day of Judgment. They would need to have a particularly fast start while us not having any relevant interaction. And there's a Starcage. Yeah, that seems fine. Keep Day of Judgment for later. Seam Rip gets rid of Authority. Can at some point play our own Seam Rip to get it back. Alright, so we've got a couple options. Can stock up, can blue Overlord, or can maybe white Overlord. Since I'm probably going to Day of Judgment, I'm going to wait on the white Overlord, so that leaves stock up versus Overlord. Mainly looking for Mirrorform at this point, and maybe more interaction. Let's stock up. Found Seam Rip plus a land or consult. With the Overlord we already have some card draw. Let's just make sure I don't need to prioritize lands going forward. And Verge doesn't seem like a priority. Sheltered by Ghosts gets their stuff back, but only temporarily. And Village is tapped anyways. Does mean I cannot discard it to the blue Overlord now. But I think we'll manage. So getting the Starcage back, of course, doesn't exile anything else. But I probably have to Day of Judgment now. And then we still have an extra permanent for a future Mirrorform. So the game goes on. Next turn maybe kick Consult. Now could be a better turn for the Overlord to make a few blockers. And then I think Scavenger's scarier than Aerialist, since most of our answers can get rid of Aerialist even through the ward. Whereas the +1 counters can add up quickly. So yeah, that's one approach. Make a few blockers, or we can cast a blue Overlord, which I also don't hate. Sure, let's do that. Even though it might get exiled by Sheltered by Ghosts, we can maybe get it back later. Seam Rip the Seam Rip, a classic. And a Weaver. So if our opponent offers the trade, do we accept? I don't think so. Can attack, draw, maybe find a sweeper, which we did. Start by attacking. Those are both pretty good. Iceberg can also exile my own permanents for what it's worth. So I could make a cool play of exiling my Star Cage, sacrifice to waterbending, and then get it back to exile the opponent's creatures, keeping the Overlord. For now I don't think I need stock up anymore. Consult digs a bit deeper. Could still be convinced to just Day of Judgment instead, since a future Sheltered by Ghosts could maybe get their creatures back if we rely on Star Cage. So this might be a bit safer, and we're already super far ahead. Could have also gone for Aura Sights to maybe get our authority back and then still Day of Judgment. Or I could have kept the stock up after all. Now a Demi would have been effective in the face of a Day of Judgment. I guess we'll use the Iceberg to be efficient. And then Consult should be able to find a Mirrorform to get the game over with. Alright, so now seems like a good turn for Consults with Kicker. Look for Mirrorform, otherwise Day of Judgment plus a land seems fine. And then how about Aura Sight? Get our authority back, or better yet, get our Steam Rip back, which in turn gets back authority. So we have even more permanence for an eventual Mirrorform. Opponent's hanging in there. If I hardcast Overlord, our opponent probably concedes, and I kind of want to win with Mirrorform. So let's start beating down with Anchorage. Can go exploring. I'll say no to the Iceberg, even though it would be a totally fine draw. But our opponent scoops it up already. Alright, so on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. Got our early removal, some card draw. Facing a green deck. Could be mono-green landfall or the blue-green cub deck. So Day of Judgment's going to be important. And then of course we're looking for Mirrorform to close out the game at some point. So I don't hate Consults. And let our elves find target for Seam Rip. So it looks more like mono-green landfall. Iceberg can also be an answer to their enchantment. Whether it's the 3-mana Ascension or the Treefolk Generator. Chocobo's fine. And another elf, so now Star Cage is looking promising. Rest in Peace is not particularly amazing here. But it could still be an extra permanent for Mirrorform purposes. And there's the Ascension. Not in a hurry to Iceberg it. So I think stock up before playing a land in case we find a tapped land. And wait on Consult. Now, the Aura Sight's pretty flexible, and I'll take a land. And Bristly Bill also gets answered by Star Cage. So that's probably the play now. And I'll play a Rest in Peace. Just for the extra permanents. Could eventually discard it to the blue Overlord. That's one reason to maybe keep it. But it does maybe still stop an Ice Still Explorer from recurring a fetch lane, so it's actually not completely useless. Harmonizer. Good target for Aura Sights, or we can now look into Mirrorform, copy the Harmonizer. But given my hands, I think we just keep it simple. Exile Harmonizer, keep up Iceberg. The Ascension's not really a threat right now. But maybe we get rid of the chocobo. Another iceberg. I can main phase consult and still maybe find an overlord I can play. Find another consult and a land. And then even if whatever overlord we find still has summoning sickness, it doesn't matter if we can attack with everything else. Second ascension still okay. But the damage is adding up, so we don't have infinite time here. Alright, still no overlord. Could stock up to try and find one. Let's see, how does the math work out? Yeah, if I stock up, I definitely won't be able to Mirrorform in the same turn. Do I need a Day of Judgment? Yeah, that does slow them down a bit. Stock up, Day of Judgment. I found the Overlord anyway. So then, let's see if I cast it for 3. I'm 1 mana short now of also playing Mirrorform. Although I could draw into something. So it's still worth a try. I did not find the untapped land I needed, but now we can Day of Judgment and then go for it next turn. And no creatures to put counters onto with the Ascension, so we should be safe. Even if they activate Basing Say, it's not like they can play Ice still and recur any fetch lanes, thanks to our Rest in Peace. Opponent's at 20, so 4 unblocked Overlords can get the job done. And I don't think our opponent's got any instant speed disenchants to mess us up. Probably shouldn't have tapped Aura Sight there, so we would have had an extra attacker. And also important to note, if you're attacking with a blue Overlord, make sure you have enough cards left in library, so you don't end up decking. But that was not a concern now. Alright, sweet. Opponent sticking around. Damage happens. And there we go. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have Starcage to defend against aggro, and then 2 Overlords. I'll try it. Get a tapped village out of the way, which could be useful against a more controlling deck. Can just play another tapped village. Not in a hurry to play Authority. They are on the artifact build after all, so Authority does have some value, especially against the sequence of a Fire Crystal giving their artifacts haste. At least they would enter tapped. But I can now play it the turn I play Aura Sights. Starcage I cannot cast yet since I don't have double white in place, so this seems like an Overlord turn. And Day of Judgment is probably worse than Starcage. Just not a very high priority card, although it could eventually be useful once they make a few constructs with Synthesizer. I think I prefer the lanes. And there's Synthesizer, which we can Aura Sight. And and get the authority down. But yeah, it's kind of the essence that we draw Mirrorform pretty quickly, because eventually the opponent's going to overwhelm us. Iceberg was another decent draw, since that gives us another answer to one of their 3 mana artifacts. But yeah, Hardcast Overlord is definitely not going to win the game, so we kind of need that surprise from Mirrorform. Repurposing Bay, a mana short of sacking the bricks to get a 3-drop. So then I can either Starcage, get rid of the bricks. I guess that still lets me keep up the Iceberg, so that's fine actually. And then if they play a 2-mana artifact with the idea of sacking it, I can exile the Repurposing Bay itself. And then top decking Mirrorform would be pretty epic, because we could be attacking for 20 damage. Yeah, there's the Relic Exile Bay in response. So that might have also messed up their sequencing slightly. But we are out of answers now. So finding a card draw effect or Mirrorform would be ideal. Snare will get Repurposing Bay back. And Seam Rip gets rid of Relic. Yeah, it's better than nothing, I guess. Can I Hardcast Overlord? I can. Pretty likely to get exiled. Both the creature and maybe the tokens with an opposing Starcage. So, kind of feel like Seam Rip on Relic is still more beneficial, although it would also draw them a card. So maybe we try a Hail Mary Hardcast Overlord here. And then we still have the other Overlord, but that will also now enter as a creature. But it's not like they're playing Day of Judgment typically, so they would need 2 more copies of Perilous Snare to get rid of both. Which they could find with a Battlefront, I guess. Authority and Relic, so they can get 1 3-drop here with Repurposing Bay. And we could still top deck a Mirrorform for the win. But yeah, I imagine they get a Perilous Snare to begin with. No, opponent gets another Repurposing Bay. Alright, so we get a turn where we get to attack. Because of Authority, I'm not too worried about hasty creatures from the opponents. Plus we now also have Aura Sight to maybe get rid of something. Found Stock Up. Don't think I'll need Starcage anymore. Opponent falls to 9. So I can Stock Up and still maybe Aura Sight plus Seam Rip. Found the Mirrorform. Can grab Consults as well. And then Aura Sight. Maybe get rid of Snare, get Iceberg back. Could be bad if our opponent returns a favor and then gets to trigger Synthesizer an additional time. But let's try it this way. And then Seam Rip the Relic. And then next turn Mirrorform should be lethal. But we'll see what our opponent can do here. Sawblades the blue Overlord. And if they also get rid of the white one, then there's no huge creature in play to Mirrorform. But maybe a token's good enough here, we'll see. Perilous Snare indeed gets rid of Aura Sight, which gets rid of... Alright, they're still going for a Repurposing Bay after all. But they do not have a 2-drop to sacrifice, because they had a Perilous Snare in hand. Well, Mirrorform still lethal. Does not trigger Authority, and I will not tap the Aura Sight. Just target an insect token and attack. Alright, it's a bit of an unconventional end to this game, but yeah, Mirrorform is quite flexible in that way. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a pretty balanced hand. Some early removal, some graveyard hate, stock up to hopefully find some of our combo pieces. But we're also happy just playing a controlling game for a while. Turn 1 Beastie, so it is a deck where Rest in Peace is going to be very effective. Can't have Delirium without a graveyard. Don't expect him to answer the first Rest in Peace, but it doesn't hurt to have a backup. So Beastie wouldn't be attacking us anytime soon. Seems like a fine turn for stock up. Opponent firing off a burn spell. Alright, so Authority can be useful since they do run a couple haste creatures. So maybe go Archive plus Authority. Use the Surveil to dig towards more card draw effects. Although I can also see the benefit of an extra untapped white source. And the opponent plays Curator and scoops it up. Rest in Peace, just stealing a quick win here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a bunch of card draw, an Overlord and a Mirrorform. So great for setting up our combo, not so great for interacting with the opponent's plan. So if they're off to a quick start, we're gonna get run over pretty quickly. And we're on the draw already. So this hand is probably not great, but I'll try it anyways. And then against blue-white, I guess we're pretty happy. I'll wait on the archive since I don't know for a fact which version of blue-white they're playing. It might affect my Surveil decision. Starting town. Okay, not in a hurry to consult, so we can scry now or Surveil and look for more lanes. Drew another Mirrorform. I see Drowner, so maybe the blue-white tempo deck. That one could be a bit trickier, since yeah, opponent's going to apply pressure while keeping up interaction. And Planeswalkers are notoriously difficult to deal with, especially a 3-mana one. Okay, so I can stock up and then discard to hand size, or I can get the Overlord going. Maybe discarding a Mirrorform, even though one of them might get countered. May need to find my uncounterable land. Rest in Peace may not be very useful here, so maybe it's better than Mirrorform. Also gives the opponent a little bit less information. Enduring Curiosity, opponent gets to draw 2. So Day of Judgment would be a fine draw here, but we're already pretty far behind. Alright, Aura Sight's not a bad solution to either a Curiosity or a Janny. I'll make it a Curiosity. If they don't have any counter spells, curving Overlord into Mirrorform could maybe steal it. Opponent passes. How about a Seam Rip for starters? They could have a Tidebinder to counter the trigger, they don't. So, could try Overlord, definitely has the highest upside. But if they do have even Interrupter or Aang, then I might be better off passing with a kicked Consult available. Yeah, with 5 cards in hand, there's no way opponent's got nothing. Alright, opponent did nothing, but could just be holding on to a counter spell. We're down to 8, a Janny, not too far from an ultimate, and the Air Temple's actually quite threatening as well.
My allies stand strong.
So they could let this resolve and then fight over a board wipe. Did not find one anyways. Probably just take 2 lanes. And a seam rip. They also have Anchorage, but they cannot activate Anchorage and Air Temple in the same turn. So, yeah, tricky spot. Maybe start with Overlord while I can pay for No More Lies. Impended, of course. I will get another Overlord as well to block with. End of turn. That resolves. I'll still Seam Rip over Stock Up just to make sure. Possible the opponent's got their own board wipe here that we're running into. Voice of Victory, that's fine. Seam Rip, the Seam Rip, Drown Earth, the Overlord. We are losing some permanents here. And Janny could also minus on a tapped creature. But they're probably gonna work up towards an ultimate.
Side by side we fight.
Well, if our opponent's on empty, I can Mirrorform Overlord and just attack for lethal. Seems worth a shot. Although there's a lot that can go wrong with that play. Opponent could have instant speed removal for the Overlord. Although most instant speed removal here would probably also deal with the enchantment if I target the white Overlord, since it would probably be a get lost. And yeah, Overlord doesn't have flying, so it wouldn't guarantee lethal like the blue Overlord would. So I think I go for it. What if I wait to block? Then of course we cannot Mirrorform in the opponent's turn because of voice. So my only alternative is Stock Up, dig for a sweeper, which they could also counter. So then I may as well go for lethal then. Alright. And then I do not want to tap the Aura Sight since it's an extra attacker. That works, okay. Go to attackers, go face. Draw 10. Alright, and that'll do it. Awesome. So yeah, we got some pretty impressive wins thanks to Mirrorform, and even as just a 2-off with our many card draw effects, we can still usually find a copy when we need it. So I don't think we need to run many more copies, since drawing too many can also be pretty detrimental, since it's kind of a dead card until it wins you the game. So I think it makes sense to kind of incorporate this in a more controlling deck, especially one that's pretty well tailored to beat up on the current best of one meta, which tends to be a lot of low to the ground creature decks. So then you do want access to Star Cage and Day of Judgment to keep the board clear, and then those removal spells naturally set up your Mirrorform once you're ready for it. So yeah, quite pleased with how this deck ended up, but of course it does have some weaknesses, especially against opposing control decks. If they can just counter your Mirrorform, or maybe some well-timed discard effects can rip your hand apart, then you could be in some trouble. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.